So I want to talk about empowering grace, because I think the message of empowering grace is incredibly humbling. I have no independent power whatsoever to be what I'm supposed to be and to do what I'm supposed to do in the plan of God. In fact, it hit me when I was just beginning this project I just talked about, that the only unlimited being in the account of creation is God. Mm-hmm. Everything else is
finite,
wired with limits, mm-hmm. and we have limits of wisdom, we have limits of strength, we have limits of righteousness, and so the Christian life, in any kind of life that's pleasing to God, is dependent on power outside of ourselves. Something has to happen to give us the power that we need. And I want to look at 2 Corinthians 12, because it really is Paul's testimony. Maybe if I could read a little, beginning of verse 7. So to keep me from becoming conceited, we got to go back and talk about that. Because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given to me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weakness, insult, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. It's one thing, Shelby, to say that power is part of God's plan for us. I mean, who wouldn't celebrate that?
Yeah, everybody would get on board with that one.
But that's not first what Paul says.
Right.
What Paul is proposing is weakness is part of God's plan. And I don't like to be weak. I mean, I've over the last several years had a multitude of physical things, 10 surgeries in 7 years. I don't like weakness. It's discouraging and frustrating. But you can't avoid the fact that God chooses us to be weak. Yeah. And that's just not a general thing. In moments, it's a very specific thing. He chooses weakness for particular people in particular situations. And Paul says, I love this confession. God had revealed so much to me about his gospel. Mm-hmm. He knew I'd just be conceited.
Yeah. Well, who wouldn't be, right? If you get this special privilege to be able to see stuff that Paul has been able to see. And I've often wondered that in my early days. I was like, how did Paul know all this? Like, how was he able to speak about all this? And I was like, oh, taken up into the third heaven. What does that mean? Of course, in human experience, we're going to be like, look at what I know and what you don't. And it's a gift from God, because conceitedness is arrogance. It's pride. God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble.
Yeah, and also it needs to be said that pride is the enemy of grace, because pride says, look who I am. Yeah. And it's like the Pharisee in the temple who's saying, God, I thank you like I'm
not like this guy.
Well, what he's saying is, hey, God, here I am. I just wanted you to know I still don't need you.
Yeah, you're so blessed to have me.
Yes.
And if only we preach the gospel that way, of how often do we go to that passage to preach the gospel and say, we need to be like the Gentile who beats his chest and says, doesn't even look up and says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. What does that look like to receive the grace and goodness of God? We're talking about weakness here. We offer weakness to people when we offer them the gospel. that doesn't sound sexy. That's not attractive on the surface. But when you dig into this and you finally understand, Paul was probably one of the most influential people in the history of humans. And he's talking about being weak so that God would help him to become a greater messenger of the truth.